Hey everyone, Richard from Digital Foundry here, and yes, we're back in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds on Xbox One and Xbox One X. This was a bit of an adventure, one that I undertook with my friend Tom Morgan, who's with me right now.
Yep, I'm back again.
So, PUBG, Tom, it's been an interesting one because technically this game is a disaster. And yes, there is a new patch, and yes, there are improvements, but it's still a disaster, isn't it?
It feels like history repeating itself, doesn't it? With Ark Survival and DayZ even. There's a sense that these pre-release games, these early beta projects that people willingly pay for to be a part of and join in the development of, don't really deliver even kind of on the basics. You know, texture streaming in this game when we first saw it was pretty poor, frame rates also very bad, and so now we've got this patch out and also a theory about DVR functionality on the Xbox One having an impact on frame rates.
Yeah, I did test that. I would say that the results were inconclusive. In some situations, turning off the DVR seemed to improve things by 1 to 2 frames per second, and then I would run a test the next moment and it would actually be worse by 1 to 2 frames per second. The game is just too dynamic really to get any kind of firm lock on that. But I suppose if you're not going to be using the game DVR functions, turn them off. It's not going to harm performance, I don't think.
You would suspect that the CPU workload would be partitioned off for that, so it shouldn't really affect anything as far as the gameplay would go.
Yeah, the only kind of theory I did have is that there might be contention on the hard drive, so it's obviously writing those captures to disk while you're gaming, while it's accessing all of those textures, so possibly that might do something, but at the same time, well, you know, as I said, we actually ran it through the frame rate tools, no conclusive results there. But let's crack on and look at the patch. Now, we spent a couple of hours this morning playing PUBG. Again, you on the Xbox One X, so you're on the left here. I am on the Xbox One on the right. Same game instance here, we've buddied up so we can measure the same workloads at any given point. And this lobby area, well, it's still horrible, but it seems to be running at a higher frame rate than what we saw in the initial release.
Yeah, it does look a little bit better based on the memory of the last version we played, the previous patch, but it is still dipping quite radically, isn't it?
And as we begin with the transporter drop-off here, 19 frames per second on the X, 16, 17 on the standard model. This is pretty much exactly what we saw the first time around. So that isn't particularly great, and it's a situation that kind of persists as we drop out of the plane and begin our descent. Now, the frame rates are just really, really poor here.
One thing that really catches my eye is the frame time readings on the left there. They're so erratic. No wonder it's difficult to play it sometimes.
I don't know. You know, we're going to talk a bit about frame times and consistency going in. But what I will say is that these areas at the beginning of the game where you're parachuting in, I don't know whether it's because we're dealing with a lot of players persisting in the same area, but things do kind of level out a bit, and once we've moved into the level a bit, you'll see a general rise in the performance level here. But yeah, you know, these initial stages, they were really bad in the first instance of the game, and they're bad here, and particularly bad for this guy who we've just bludgeoned to death.
Yeah, that was pretty unfortunate for him. We had a similar sort of a result to this game the last time we played it side by side, you know. Obviously I had a considerably better experience of it being on the X hardware, a smoother frame rate generally and better textures. So from your side, from the standard Xbox One side, would you say it's better overall in the frame rate stakes?
Well, we're still showing clips from the beginning of the game, and what generally tends to happen is that these first initial steps are really, really bad in terms of performance, but you know, you can see it here, we're kind of leveling out at 30 frames per second, and what I will say is that, well, I'm pretty sure that performance is generally better than it was the first time we tested it. Now, the problem is, of course, that we can't actually do precise like-for-like tests, but what I think is happening is that generally frame rates are better, but the netcode seems to have got significantly worse. So yeah, in this particular instance, performance holds up fairly well overall, but then for some bizarre reason, you get a performance drop and I don't.
Yeah, what's up with that? We're basically running on the same router as well.
We are literally in the same room, in the same area, and yet, you know, because you've taken a hit, well, you know, you seem to have suddenly got a dip in performance, which is kind of bizarre. But yeah, we both died there, which wasn't pretty, especially after I was trying to revive you after shooting you in the head with a micro Uzi.
Would it be fair to say that there is more of a rubber banding effect, as the network kind of lags behind after the patch than before? Because I don't remember as much sort of stuttering and hitching. That kind of throws me off where I thought I was. Even walking through a door has proven to be quite a difficulty in this latest version, but that might just be me.
Well, I've got to admit, when I went in to play the patched version of the game, I didn't expect to be teleporting around the place, because that didn't happen the last time around when we first played it last week. But what I will say is that we posted some initial impressions on Twitter yesterday of the patch, and some users did point out that this rubber banding was happening before the patch dropped, so it sounds like a server-side issue. But, it all sort of contributes to the feeling that we've just paid £25, £50 in our case, because we had 2 copies of the game, to actually play what is in effect work in progress code that really isn't fit for purpose. I mean, in these clips we seem to be doing okay, but as you'll see further on in the analysis, it's just not good enough.
We picked up on something quite funny actually as we were playing through, running on the theory that the lag, the network problems only kick in when you're kind of proximate to an enemy. There's an idea that there's more stuttering as you're approaching something that should be exciting, like a moment of action. So, anytime we came close to a town and I saw that hitching in play, I told you, well, looks like there's somebody up ahead, we should probably see what's going on.
Yeah, that was quite indicative, wasn't it? I mean, in this clip here, we're both on a motorcycle, which you located, and we headed to this settlement here because we were fairly sure that we would get attacked, that there was somebody there, because of the stuttering. And lo and behold, we're driving through this little township here, and yes, we're getting shot to pieces here. And we kind of had the heads up that this would happen because of all of that glitching that was happening.
Another funny aside to that is the only reason I really spotted the vehicle in the first place was because the definition of it on the distance was a bit more precise on the X console, so one of the rare examples where actually playing on the X gave me a bit of a heads up there. These environments are huge.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that, it is still 4K versus 1080p. Draw distance is still better on the X. I think the developers have said that the anti-aliasing has slightly improved with this patch. There does seem to be reduced levels of blur compared to the first version of the game there, so things are a bit clearer now. But generally, I'd say the visual feature set of the game is much the same.
Yeah, still lots of pop-in. The texture filtering may well have gotten a bump, but generally there's still a lot of sort of roughness in the presentation of the game, texture-wise, and in the outlines of geometry as well. There's still a lot of shimmering, especially on the original Xbox One.
But what this clip is showing is that, there are swathes of gameplay that do play out at 30 frames per second as intended. And now, I'll say that, and suddenly the performance has taken a hit here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
But yeah, a kind of rare instance here of the X actually performing worse than the Xbox One there. And, again, not much going on, but, it kind of made us wonder, well, maybe there's some people lurking in the background here that are ready to attack us, because it did seem to be the case that we saw a great deal of network stutter just before an encounter.
It is very indicative, and I think right around the corner we did find someone. We will soon see. But in general, the other big problem, I suppose, is there's a lot of meandering about. It's the same criticism as before. Lots of meandering, waiting for that precise killer moment where you're face to face with someone, and then the controls fail you because of that latency, the frame times, and the input lag, which has become a kind of common objection to this game from a lot of people playing it.
Input lag is an interesting one. So I asked Nigel Woodall, who's the king of latency analysis testing, to take a look at PUBG, and we do have some metrics, and the result isn't pretty. So at the absolute best case, we have end-to-end latency of 133 milliseconds, and typically it's closer to 150 milliseconds, which is kind of like the same level of lag that we had with Killzone 2 on the PlayStation 3, a game that was renowned for being particularly laggy. And well, you can expect that to get worse when the frame rate drops. So yeah, we actually had a lot of encounters here where the controls seem to be acting in more of an advisory fashion, as opposed to the kind of precision response you'd need from a first-person shooter. So again, I don't think that has improved with the patch. Definitely still needs a lot of work there, but just the fact that the frame rate drops in encounters quite consistently definitely a bit of an issue for me. But yeah, here we are with one of the final clips we've put together here. Nice vista shots here, which again shows that the draw distance on the Xbox One X is better, foliage draw distance is better, and weirdly we have lower performance on the X again.
Is that due to the draw calls? Maybe it is.
Either that or bandwidth. I mean, there's a lot of transparencies going on here drawing that foliage, but it's really not ideal.
So in your experience, are you seeing as many of those soup-like textures on the floor as you did before, or do you reckon it's been improved?
That's a curious one, because again, we don't have like-for-like comparison points, but you know, there are some instances where the artwork just looks absolutely terrible, but generally it kind of looks okay. What I will say though is that, you know, I noted some debris on the floor in buildings where the most rudimentary of textures were in place, literally a jumble of pixels as opposed to any decent artwork here. Certainly looking at these clips side by side, the massive disparities that we saw at launch don't seem quite so badly pronounced now. Clearly there is still a difference between the two versions, but maybe that is an area where they have improved.
And yet, through all these problems, I was still having quite a bit of fun playing this in co-op with you, actually.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, we've never really doubted the potency of the concept here. It is brilliant fun to play. But, you know, when we have these really frustrating moments, which do seem to be down to the lack of response in controls, to the diving frame rate, at that point, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is pretty good, but I'd much prefer to play it on PC.
Or if failing that, maybe the developer could have chosen a completely different engine to work from to deliver this open world, network-based experience.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, you know, you look at Fortnite, which has its own Battle Royale mode now, and it just works really, really nicely, really smooth. But that is actually the same engine as this one. But this is the final clip here, and it is an extended one. This is consistently poor performance from start to finish. So essentially, it's an extended traversal clip. And, well, maybe it's something to do with the streaming systems, because we are traveling at fairly decent speeds here. But you can see that the Xbox One X has a big advantage over the standard model here.
The Xbox One X isn't affected quite as badly. It's this industrial area that really kicked it off as well. There's obviously it's a focal point for players to meet at. The playing area was narrowing at this point, and we played a fair ways into the game by this point, so it makes sense that as the game comes to its grand finale, you're going to get more people focused and condensed, and again, the frame rate issues we had at the very start of the game would kind of crop up all over.
I'd say, you know, overall this game still has a long way to go before we can consider it worthy of purchase. The thing that annoys me a bit about this, let's go back last week to that initial build of the game, which was so suboptimal. I mean, obviously things have improved here. Now, what if the developer had just done like a 48-hour beta test, so everyone could dive in and they could actually stress test the system, see what the problems are before putting it on sale? Now, maybe it would have put people off buying the game based on the performance level. But, you know, I just think it would have been a more honest way to go about things. There's a very fine line that we've got here, because it is an early access piece of code, so you can expect that performance will be suboptimal. But on the plus side, you know, the PC version has been gradually improving over the months, and, you know, we kind of expected something closer to a release-worthy game here, but we're still some way short of that, I think.
Yeah, this was meant to be the first pass patch to kind of clear up a few small problems with the game. It may be a bit too much to ask for them to jump in over Christmas and fix the swathe of issues that are going on with the performance side. So maybe waiting till next year is the ticket if you're still on the fence about buying it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the hottest game of the moment, and it's such a shame that it was released in this state, because, you know, we have seen some progress from one week to the next, but at the same time I think the server response has actually got a lot worse since last week, which, you know, really isn't ideal. There is the sense that users are being treated almost like guinea pigs here, and I'm not sure that's quite right, but, well, that's the way things are at the moment. Okay, so that is the newly released PUBG patch for Xbox One and Xbox One X. I hope this cleared up some of the follow-up questions people have been asking for, but that's all from us for now. Please do like and subscribe to support the work we do here at Digital Foundry, and we'll see you next time.